going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with a little Thursday night football preview between the Chargers and the Chiefs. Going to break down the injury situations, game environment, the players that I expect to be the best targets for the single game slate to give you an idea of who to target for your own lineups, and of course some of the strategy and sort of correlations to keep in mind when building your lineups. It should be an absolute banger. We've got the Chargers and the Chiefs, two of the highest powered offenses in all of the league. Of course, Justin Herbert, who looks like an absolute killer, and the Chiefs offense, which frankly in week 1 looked even better than it did last year. I mean, really, a 55-point total, everything that we're looking for. So excited to hop into it. Let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. All right, I've got the projection sheet up, and as per usual, we're going to touch on the game environment to begin. We'll talk through some of the injuries and then talk through my favorite targets to finish it up. So in general, we've got ourselves a 54.5 point total. You have the Chiefs favored by 4 points. I think that that's pretty much spot on. I think it should be a shootout. Now, 54.5 points, I'm not sure if we'd be taking the over there, but I do think it's insightful from the fantasy perspective. You know, it's going to be two fast-paced, highly efficient passing offenses that likely the Chiefs are going to lead for most of the game. I mean, they're at home. They've got that going for them. One of the more boisterous crowds out there in all of the NFL, so they definitely get a home field advantage. You have Patrick Mahomes, who's in his prime at this point. I think a lot of people are forgetting about that. This season and the next for Patty Mahomes should be his best of his whole career. So expect him, even without Tyreek Hill, to put up historical type numbers. And on the flip side, you've got Justin Herbert, who's on arguably even a better trajectory than somebody like Patty Mahomes had. So this is going to be a very competitive affair. I do expect the Chiefs to win, but in either circumstance, both teams to be very fantasy relevant. I mean, the defenses are, I'd say, above average on either side, but neither of them are elite. So for an elite level pass thrower like Herbert, like Patrick Mahomes, like we have on either side, they're not going to have any issues. Really, it's all about the types of strategy or the types of stacks that we go with when we're implementing these quarterbacks. You know, for example, with Patty Mahomes, you want to match him up with at least 2 pass catchers. Guys like Travis Kelce come to mind, Juju, if he can play, MVS, Mecole Hardman are all perfect candidates for a stack there. And with Justin Herbert, he's dealing with a little bit of an injury situation. So guys like Keenan Allen, Donald Parham Jr. might end up being on the sideline. So it's a little bit more limited there, where you have Mike Williams, who might be catching balls, Joshua Palmer, you have DeAndre Carter be a huge piece of that offense there in week 1. And outside of that, it drops off quickly. So it's more about who you play with these quarterbacks and whether you're going to play them with such a high game total. It's a no-brainer to play both of these QBs. Let's talk about some of the injuries now. I touched on Keenan Allen. He's the major question mark here as of right now. I do project him as out. He left with a hamstring injury, has not practiced on Monday. We have not gotten the report from Tuesday yet, but I would imagine he doesn't practice on Tuesday. If anything, is limited and is likely sidelined for Thursday. I'm also projecting Donald Parham Jr. to be out. He was out for week 1, didn't practice Monday, probably not going to practice in full on Tuesday, and I would expect a similar prognosis for Parham Jr. So that's really it with the injuries. I mean, on the Chiefs, you have Mahomes, who was limited. Same thing with Juju Smith-Schuster, who was a limited participant on Monday. But you have to remember that it's a short turnaround. If there's even any semblance of an injury or any sort of fatigue, these players are going to be rested on Mondays just for the safety, right? Go out there, play it safe, give them a little bit of extra time to recuperate before the short turnaround. And especially for Juju, who's, no spring chicken anymore. He's not old. He's not a veteran receiver, but actually he's a veteran receiver, but he's not some old wily veteran out there who's had a lot of miles on him. Mahomes, right, they're probably just taking it a little bit safe with him as well, giving him an extra day off. So they do have Q tags as of right now, but I wouldn't look that much into it. I expect Juju and Mahomes to play, but in case anything crazy happens out there, I guess just know that the Q tags are there. In terms of players that I like, so we're going to go through my projections. Ownership is blacked out. That is all on my Patreon page. And remind you, if you want access to all of my projections, not just the ones that are highlighted here on the page, they are on the Patreon page. But I like both quarterbacks. We talked about that. That's a no-brainer. We're not going to waste time telling you to play the quarterbacks on Showdown. I think you know to do that, right? More importantly, the guys that you want to go ahead and mix them with. And at this point, I'm expecting a historic season for Travis Kelce. I mean, Mahomes, I mentioned that he should put up the best numbers of his career, and Travis Kelce is going to be a direct beneficiary of that, particularly without Tyreek Hill now. He demands an even larger amount of the total target share around this offense. It's still scoring at an elite level, and I know he's $11,000, but I like his chances to be an optimal captain. So I know he's a little bit pricey. There are a few guys that I like a little bit more to get at the captain slot, but I think it makes sense, and I'm definitely going to have exposure both at flex and captain, particularly in lineups where I have Patty Mahomes. Now, I like him a little bit more at captain than Patty Mahomes because he's definitely a little bit more liable to get you to that 25, 30-point performance. And I know there's only an $800 difference. I project Kelce for 19 points, whereas Mahomes there for 24.5. But to get to 30, 32 points, Kelce has a lot more equity on that top end of the spectrum than a Patty Mahomes. Like his true ceiling performance was what we saw there in week 1, where he threw 5 touchdowns, threw for over 300 yards. It's going to take a perfect sort of night like that for him to get to that performance. Whereas with Travis Kelce, 150 yards, 8 catches, and a touchdown right there. What's that, like 29 points? Let alone if he goes out there, scores 2 touchdowns, doesn't even have to put as much up on the board in terms of yardage. He has a legit path to that performance, even at that price tag. So I'll be taking him at captain in a few lineups. He's not going to be my favorite captain. I think he'll be relatively low owned there too, just because of the price tag. But I do think it's worth investing in. He has a path to get to that performance, particularly with Tyreek Hill out of the lineup. Austin Eckler is always going to get a huge portion of the snaps, but I think the thing to really focus on here is the impact of Keenan Allen being out. Now, this offense is typically right around like a 60-40 split when it comes to their pass versus rush efficiency. Without Keenan Allen, it might get even more rush heavy. So guys like Austin Eckler could be a huge beneficiary there, on top of the fact that he might see more targets out of the backfield because of Keenan Allen being out of there. I mean, Keenan was known for those short routes, more of those, little 5-yard outs, that sort of thing. Maybe a few screens out of the backfield can be a little bit of a replacement for that. Maybe not a replacement, but sort of a supplement to make up for the huge hole that Keenan is leaving on that offense. In either circumstance, I love Austin Eckler on this slate. Not going to give you an idea of how much, though. You're going to have to see it on the Patreon to see exactly where I project him. But Mike Williams is a clear spot to target here, and I think he might be a little bit lower owned here on this slate, even if Keenan Allen is rolled out like we expect him to be, just because of his performance week 1. He was horrible. He was pretty much non-existent in that offense. He was healthy. He ran a lot of routes. So he's cheaper than he should be there at $9,000 because of that. And he might legitimately be 10 to 20% lower owned than he would be otherwise just because of that performance. And it's a 1-week sample size. Again, week 1, a lot of weird stuff happens. You have players that aren't on the same page, that are rusty out there. Sometimes in a single game script, you just get shut out, even as an elite level player, especially at the wide receiver position where it's so down to the targets, a lot of the opportunities that you're getting. Don't overreact. Mike Williams, without Keenan Allen, is going to get a ton of targets out here for a really efficient Chargers team that should be playing behind for most of the game. So guys like Mike Williams, who demand those down-the-field targets, are going to get a ton of them, particularly if they're down by a touchdown or two. So I love him at captain. Way more affordable than somebody like Kelce. 16.5, it's doable, but somebody like 13.5 is a little bit more realistic for rounding out the rest of your lineup there. So I like the price tag. I like the situation, and more importantly, I also think he's going to be relatively low owned because of the week 1 performance. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I played in my lineups for the main slate, and it worked out beautifully. Went out there, got a ton of targets, scored over 20 fantasy points, but I do think he might be a little bit overhyped going into this slate. Now, ownership projections, it's way early in the week, right? Don't reflect that. But I think by the time we get to game time, people are going to be buying in on CEH, and it might be a little bit of a harder prospect to get there. I project him well at this point. As of right now, I do expect to be playing him, but I am worried about that ownership. So if you want to get the latest up-to-date information on that, it'll be on the Patreon. But more importantly, on Wednesday, we'll also be doing, Thursday, we'll be doing a live stream here covering Thursday Night Football right around 5 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will also be able to talk about some of the chalk. And maybe that ends up being CEH, maybe it doesn't. Something we'll have to keep an eye on. Juju should play. I project him well. He was the clear wide receiver one, I guess after Travis Kelce, but the true wide receiver one on this team that we saw. I got a bunch of targets, had a majority of the snaps out there, got a lot of looks in the red zone. Just overall, Juju played how we expected him to, right? Wasn't overly impressive, certainly wasn't disappointing from any perspective either. You can play him at captain, you could get to him too. I mean, he's only 12,000 opposed to 16.5 of Travis Kelce. The issue I have is that Kelce has that 30-point ceiling, whereas Juju probably has like a 24-point ceiling at the very most right there. Just a little bit more upside with getting to Kelce, who can absolutely break a slate. So I like Juju. I like MVS too, another wide receiver on the Chiefs. The issue I have with them in general is they have so many adequate wide receivers there. And going into the year, we didn't really think so, right? We thought that Tyreek Hill leaving was going to be an issue, but they've got Kelce. Again, they've got Juju, MVS, Hardman out there. They got a few other backups that they were really using at tight end. I mean, Fortson caught a touchdown here at $600 week one. Noah Gray got a few targets as well there. Just, they're really spreading the ball around there on the Chiefs, which is great for their offense. They're going to be very efficient because of that. But from a fantasy perspective, it's a little bit infuriating because trying to really narrow down on the usage rates is going to be a little bit more difficult than per se on the Chargers, where we know a lot of it's going to go to Mike Williams. Austin Eckler is going to be an absolute usage hog. And then outside of that, we have Joshua Palmer down here, Everett, and Carter. It's pretty much going to be it for the LA Chargers side. So these guys at $5,000, $4,800, and $4,600 are going to be key pieces of value here in the player pool. But the one I really want to touch on is Joshua Palmer, who in week one kind of took a back seat to DeAndre Carter. And like I mentioned with Mike Williams, a lot of that is just down to opportunity. The other team was really hunkering down on Mike Williams. Clearly, they were trying to take him out when Keenan Allen was out of there. And then they saw Joshua Palmer as the next best threat. So DeAndre Carter was pretty much left to his own out there, got wide open, and took advantage. This week, maybe that's Joshua Palmer. Maybe they overreact, start to put a little bit more attention towards Carter, and Palmer is the one that goes out there. And he's the one that everyone thought going into the year was going to break out, be somebody you might want to take in those best ball drafts like I did in quite a few. And I'm not jumping off of that narrative, right? I'm not going to overreact to a 1 week sample size. So I like him there at $5,000. He'll be a key piece of value that I'm taking for the Chargers. Like Everett, he scored a touchdown in week one. He got quite a few targets, showed yard after catch ability like you'd expect for Everett. And Carter, I don't think he's the worst play, but I do think because of his performance in the first week, he might be a little bit overowned. People might be a little bit too bullish on him after just having a one good game, and we'll have to see about it. Again, on Wednesday, we'll have a much better idea on ownership, and we'll be able to circle back on that sort of thing. Moving down to the 4K range, we have a lot of kickers, defenses, that sort of thing. I'm not a huge fan of the defenses. They are a lot cheaper on this slate just because of the implied total. So if you think that you can score a defensive touchdown, return a kick, which happens, once every 10, 15 showdown slates, then by all means, go ahead and play them. But there's going to be a lot of points scored out there. See a lot of picks, right? We're going to see a lot of passes between these two teams. So you might want to target that just in hopes that there's 2 or 3, 4 interceptions on a side. Might be a way to an optimal lineup. I do like the kickers, though. More importantly, I like Hopkins over Butker. Butker got injured in week one. He's dealing with some sort of left ankle injury, so it's not his kicking foot. He was able to kick towards the end of the game, but immediately afterwards, they did turn to their safety, Eric Reed, to do all of their kickoffs. So keep an eye on that. He should be able to suit it up. Again, he played in the second half of that game anyways, but definitely was injured. You could tell that he was dealing with quite a bit of pain. In terms of actual full-on punts down at the bottom, Sony Michel's the backup running back for the Chargers. I didn't see that many targets or that many rushes in week one, so I'm not that bullish on his chances. McKinnon, on the other hand, I really do like. I think he'll be a little bit underowned because he is at least in my opinion, based on the snap share that I saw in week one, he's the number 2 running back on this team, priced as the 3rd most expensive behind Isaiah Pacheco, who went out there, had a pretty good gainer of his own out there. But I like McKinnon because of his receiving upside. He's going to get plenty of targets out of the backfield. He was getting a few rushes too, and in the past, he's gone out there and scored plenty of touchdowns on showdown sites. He's been the optimal lineup for the Chiefs plenty of times. So I like him there. He's only $2,600. He's by far my favorite value on the slate. He's going to be in a ton of my lineups, to be honest, because I think he'll be underowned for the Chiefs side that's favored, has the higher implied total, And you can stack him with Mahomes because he's got a lot of receiving upside. And lastly, we've got Jalen Guyton. And we don't even know how much he's going to play because, like I said, they do have Carter, they do have Palmer out there and Williams as their first 3 wide receivers, but he's their number 4 threat. He's probably going to see a few snaps when the other guys get tired and whatnot. But the thing that I like about Guyton is his big play upside. He's extremely explosive, one of the fastest players on the field, no matter when he goes out there, and could break a slate at $1,200. I mean, for yesterday's slate, I played Will Dissly. I'll go ahead and show my lineup on the screen here. I played him just as a pure flyer. I mean, I played a few tight ends like Parkinson in a few lineups. Obviously, he scored last night too. But Dissly was the absolute nuts there at the bare minimum. I mean, Jalen Guyton has a lot more upside than Dissly out there, and because of some of the injuries to the team, he could see a solid 20-30% snap share. That's more than enough upside for me. So I like in the Jalen Guyton. Xander Horvath did score in week 1, but I don't really have that much interest. Fortson played. Same thing with Noah Gray for Kansas City. So if you're looking for really cheap flyers, again, $600 and $200 right there, those are probably your guys. And Michael Burton will see a few snaps for this Chiefs team. He's a fullback. If you want him to score on the complete goal line, get you that 1-yard touchdown, that is his way to get to the optimal lineup. And it is possible. It happened a few times last year with Michael Burton. And because of how high scoring this game is, taking these guys at $200 to $400, $600 up here, even, $1,200 Jaden Guyton have a lot of utility because up top we're trying to jam in these players, right? They're all projecting for like 20 fantasy points, 24.5 like a Patrick Mahomes. The more that we can fit into our lineups, the higher that they'll project. And a clear way to do that is to almost get a free square down here, like somebody like a Noah Gray, Michael Burton, or Jalen Guyton, like I mentioned a little bit before. Boys, that is all I've got for the Thursday Night Football preview. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and let me know who you think wins this matchup. And also, go ahead and smash that like button. I appreciate all the support here. We'll have that live stream on Thursday, so make sure to stay tuned for that. I'm assuming we'll be live right around 5 p.m. Eastern, talking about the inactives and actives. If anything has changed throughout the week, we'll talk ownership, strategy, all of your live questions as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of you guys at that stream. Until then, best of luck with all of your lineups. I do have plenty of golf content on the channel too. So if you're looking for that for the Fortnite Championship, make sure to check all of that out as well. But best of luck and let's get this cash, fellas.